I think picking the weakest witch in the coven is something that's really difficult because in the series we see the girls have varying level of ability, and what motivates one girl might not motivate another, and we've all seen them do some pretty heinous things to other people and amongst themselves. So in order to properly answer this question, I think it's better suited as which girl desired to be the supreme the least, because I think depending on how you look at it, all of the girls would probably be considered very strong, if not in one thing than another. And of course, I think we could also break it down even further. So I'm gonna do this video in two parts, not necessarily two videos, but two parts. The first one is I'm gonna address the weakest witch in American Horror Story Coven, and then I'll address the weakest witch in American Horror Story Apocalypse. So personally, if we have to consider all of the members of the coven that we know, we could consider Stevie Nicks, Cicely, and Quentin as the three weakest members of American Horror Story Coven. But if you're asking about the girls in the house, then I would say, as the picture suggests, Misty Day is probably our weakest member. And that's just because even though her power of resurgence is very powerful, it's not necessarily an offensive gift. Not to mention, Misty really wanted no parts of being in the house at all. It was only after she started getting hunted that she realized that there was a benefit to staying around other witches. Now, Misty Day has a very kind and gentle nature, and we see her willingness to help her other housemates several times throughout the series, even without knowing them very well. And she does appreciate her bonds that she develops with Cordelia and Zoe and other members of the house. But what makes Misty a bit of a liability is her desire to avoid conflict when it's necessary. So we see this most importantly in American Horror Story Apocalypse, because I definitely think Madison, having been in hell, was still capable of fighting after she was released, but Misty, having been in hell, was unable to do so, and Cordelia gave her a pass and told her to go and heal, and all she wanted to do was hang out by herself and, you know, listen to Stevie Nicks. So she got the opportunity to do that in Apocalypse. But I think as a result of this very gentle nature, her resolve and her tenacity is not as strong as other characters. And I think when you're fighting the Antichrist or witch hunters or other threats, you kind of need to be willing to inflict harm. Now, this doesn't mean that Misty isn't willing to do that, but normally it's not preempted. It's usually as a result of somebody inflicting harm on something else. And we see this when she brings the alligators back to life and they attack the poachers. And we also see this when she was willing to unalive the Axeman. And we also know she is not she's not averse to violence, especially when Madison knocked her out in the cemetery. You know, she got her licks back by punching her in the face. But as far as being as aggressive as other witches, as proactive as other witches, Misty Day just doesn't have that. She's a really chill girl, a chill spirit, and they had to do a lot of convincing with her to even get her to consider pursuing the supremeship, especially after Myrtle had been talking to her. But honestly, I think Misty is probably the strongest candidate for weakest witch in that regard. Now, in American Horror Story Apocalypse, the weakest witch in the coven is Coco. And I think it's just because we don't really get to see much time with her, but Mallory has the ability to literally move through time, but she's also a supreme. But we also see other witches in the coven, like Bubbles McGee, be able to read people's minds. Coco's gift is to sense danger, which is really important. And I think this is what kept her and Mallory alive going into the memory wipe. But I think part of the problem is there's really not much you can do with it. It's kind of like being a security monitor instead of a security guard. So Coco doesn't really have as many abilities as other witches we see in American Horror Story Apocalypse, although I think her gift is very useful. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments and tell me who you think the weakest witch is, and I look forward to seeing you guys in my next video.